Welcome on board the Richplanet starship, broadcasting from somewhere high above the Earth. I'm Richard D. Hall, and I'm going to kick things off by taking a look at some of this week's news items. First off, Barack Obama has cancelled any future manned missions to the moon. The last one was in 1972, and astronauts were incensed by this decision. And one day, perhaps we'll learn the real reason for this decision. An alleged suicide bomber in the UK tried to gain employment as a temporary cabin crew member in order to carry out a terrorist attack. IT expert Rajib Karim, aged 30, allegedly indicated that he could be trained to stand in for the striking cabin crew and offered to use it as an opportunity for a terrorist attack. Prosecutor Colin Gibbs said that Karim had a clear intention and desire to offer himself for terrorist attacks and achieve martyrdom. Now, I would say, how do you know that someone has the intention until they've actually carried out the attack? This smells to me of yet another false flag event by the intelligence agencies. And it's almost as preposterous as the underpant bomber case. Moving on, and in New York City, officials have agreed to pay up $657 million to thousands of rescue workers who were working in the cleanup event after 9/11. The settlement would compensate more than 10,000 plaintiffs who say they were made sick by dust at the ground zero site of the attacks. Now, what is significant for this to me is the fact that the authorities are admitting that there was huge quantities of strange dust that no one has an explanation for at the site of 9/11. Now, does this not add weight to the theory that some kind of advanced energy weapon was used to bring the towers down? Moving on, and it's come to our attention that strange planet-sized spheres some people are calling UFOs have been photographed in close proximity to the sun. The images were taken by NASA's SOHO unmanned spacecraft, which monitors the sun and broadcasts images of the sun on its website. The spheres are about the size of planet Earth and started showing up round about the 18th of January this year. Now, NASA have passed these images off as mere compression artifacts, highly magnified. In other words, there's some kind of photographic anomaly. But some people believe that NASA are continuing to cover up these images, and people are coming up with various different theories, such as the objects are in fact spacecraft entering our solar system through the sun, and the sun is a stargate which connects to a black hole in another galaxy. Okay, and finally, on Sunday the 7th of March, during the night over a quiet Somerset house, scores of swooping starlings tumbled out of the sky for no apparent reason and landed in somebody's front garden. More than 100 birds were found, each with blood oozing from its beak and curled up claws. It's a mystery, and no one seems to have an explanation for this bizarre event. One would assume that possibly some kind of gas or chemicals caused this, but you would then think, well, what on earth is poisonous gas doing in the air above Somerset? Okay, it's time to introduce this week's guest. And I've interviewed this week's guest many times before. He's an expert in ufology, he's an expert in animal mutilation and crop circles. So without further ado, let's activate the teleporter and get him beamed up onto the ship. It's David Cayton. Welcome, David. Have a seat. Welcome on board the starship, David.
Thank you very much, Richard. Thank you.
How did you
Very pleased to be here.
How did you find the teleportation?
Well, okay. I'm on tablets for vertigo, so it's perhaps a good thing.
Right.
I don't want to look out of the window too much, you see.
Right.
So anyway, first of all, I'd like to say how delighted I am and pleased to be your first guest on the launch of your starship, Enterprise.
Well,
and
thanks for coming
hope
in.
it goes successfully, and perhaps you'll get Captain Kirk on one day.
Well, perhaps. Who knows? Right. Well, you've come in today, David, or we've beamed you up today to talk about British ufology that you've been involved with for sort of the last 20 years or so.
Yeah,
and from the late 1980s. And how did you get involved? Who was it that sort of got you involved in the ufology scene originally?
Well, it was Roy Dudden, him and I were still working at British Aerospace. I think it was 1989. In fact, all my comments are sort of just my perception and my personal things that happened interfacing with ufologists and so on. So I haven't made a particular study of ufology from A to Z, you know, for me.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was Roy who triggered me off and showed me crop circle pictures over the lunch table and this sort of thing. And he said, why not sign up and subscribe to the Bufora magazine?
Bufora, that's British UFO Research Association,
I believe.
Okay.
Yes, yeah. And it was quite expensive then. It was £25 a year or something. And I was quite disappointed with the magazine. It was quite boring and no illustrations and nothing exciting. It really fired me up. And I got the sort of feeling from editorial comments and things that the people running the magazine, the editorial team, were somewhat more than sceptical.
Non-believers, I think, a lot of them.
Well, I didn't perceive that at the time, but yes.
People in Bufora tend to try and explain everything away in normal everyday terms. Would you agree with that?
Yes, and again, to attempt to do that, you could argue, is not a bad thing in essence, but I think as time's gone on, they've probably gone over the top on that. And it has the effect of putting people off. So anyway, I didn't renew after 12 months subscription. I didn't fancy another 25 quid for some boring stuff. And I think Roy also discontinued.
Right.
So I've never been a member of a Bufora group, a UFO group, or anything like that.
So that was probably the main, establishment group, if you could call it that.
Yes, I think
and Quest International, who you joined in '93, was probably a bit more open-minded, would you say?
Yes, and they came along from an original, I think it was called the Yorkshire UFO group, where Graham and Mark Birdsall kicked it off, and then Tony Dodd joined them. I think he was probably still a serving officer originally. I'm not too sure. He might have retired.
And they started the magazine.
And they eventually started the UFO magazine, which I was very impressed with.
Yes, I've seen copies of that, and it is a superb, or was a superb magazine. It's not running anymore now. But
Tony, as a personality, was the guy that really fired me up. And I thought if he'd stuck his head over the parapet by reporting a sighting on duty with two other officers in 1978, I think it was, and despite the wishes of the two guys, he made a formal report to his superiors, which actually affected his police career and his promotion. So I thought, for a guy to do that, that impressed me. So when I took a retirement from British Aerospace in January '93, later in the year, I contacted Tony and said, do you need another researcher, investigator for the Greater Manchester area? And he said, so I'd give him a background of what I'd been doing, and he said, yeah, fine, sign me up. Got my badge. Should have brought.
And you then started going to conferences in Leeds, I believe?
Yes, they didn't have formal conferences in those days. They had informal meetings at an old building called Centenary House in Leeds. I think it was monthly. And it was a very relaxed, open sort of forum thing. Graham and Mark would talk about certain subjects and topics. They would invite people from the floor who had some experience to come up. They even got me on my feet twice, I think, about some events in the Manchester area. And then eventually they decided to invite outside keynote speakers. And they got Bob Dean heard speak there, and Colonel Wendell Stevens, and they were terrific. And then Graham, I think, eventually started to do more formal public conferences, and it sort of went on from there.
And was it that group that covered the alien autopsy? Did they have that at their conference? And I think '95, or was that a different group?
No, it was Quest.
It was Quest.
Everyone was talking about it because in '95, that's when Ray Santilli actually released this
alien autopsy video footage.
The earth-shaking thing, which was going to be the smoking gun for ufology and all that. And it's supposed to be 1940s cine film of an alien body. And surgeons, taking the organs out and cutting it up, etc. And
I just mentioned there Keith Goodyear, who's an executive producer at Edge Media, he was instrumental in actually revealing that that thing was a fake.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
he recognised someone on the tape who he knew from a TV studio.
Dear me, yeah.
Yeah. So,
Anyway,
yes, carry on.
So this was one of the main featured events at that early Leeds conference. And it's the first time I'd actually seen and heard Linda Moulton Howe speak, and Michael Hesman, the German chappie, they were on the platform extolling the virtues of the Santilli film. Sort of supporting that it was genuine.
Yes.
And I didn't disagree entirely. And Linda was sort of saying...
So you thought it was a fake from the word
Yeah,
go?
yeah.
Right.
And I wasn't impressed with the military, ex-RAF as I was, as a photographer. I thought no military photographer was going to make such a crappy job of such an important event. If it was real, it would be a really important event. They wouldn't have one camera and handheld and kept going out of focus. Very unprofessional. And in fact, the guy, if he was in the military, would have been bloody court-martialed for the terrible job he did of it. And of course, I didn't appreciate then the commercial interest that Linda and Michael Hesman had in promoting that in their magazines, websites. Well, perhaps websites weren't going then, but going on conference platforms. Yeah. So at question time, I stuck my hand up and said my piece. Well, okay. I think it was probably not genuine.
Right. And then moving on from that, there was a conference at Southport, I believe.
Yes. That was again in the 90s, late 90s.
Late 90s.
Yeah. And that was organised by Tim Matthews and Eric Morris. And again, it was mainly a Bufora thing. And Harry Harris, who I met earlier, who was into abductees and having them laterally regress, etc. And Linda Taylor, one of the abductees, and myself were sort of invited to participate. And because at the end of the conference, they planned an open debate about abductions.
Right.
And the whole thing was a debacle. It was a fight.
Right.
Two guys gate crashed in.
Right.
And started shouting and bawling out at Tim Matthews.
Right.
And there was a bit of a fight and a scuffle while they ejected those guys. And then some Bufora speakers, like there was Jenny Randalls, Peter Brooksmith, Gloria Dixon, who was the president of Bufora at the time.
And alien abduction was one of the main themes of that conference then?
Well, no, the main speakers were talking about anything.
Right, okay.
But so Jenny Randalls, and I was shocked because in her talk, she started to talk about Rendlesham Forest event in 1980, and I thought, this should be good. I mean, she was directly involved in researching that case in the first place with Dot Street and Brenda Butler, Harry Harris, and I think a retired police superintendent called Norman Collinson, who was friendly with Harry. And she produced a book called Sky Crash in association with Dot Street and Brenda Butler. And they actually got the national press, and they ended up with the News of the World to break the news that it's official, a UFO's landed in Suffolk.
Right.
So having capitalised on this case for so many years, I couldn't believe my ears when she starts to ridicule and debunk the Rendlesham Forest.
Okay. So what was her explanation for what the Rendlesham UFO was?
I honestly can't remember. I wish I could.
Right. Okay. A lot of the Rendlesham witnesses are, I've heard, going to get together later on this year, all in the UK somewhere. I don't think they've announced a venue or anything like that. The likes of Jim Penniston and Larry Warren and Charles Holt, all the people who saw the triangular-shaped UFO come and land in Rendlesham Forest, all military, highly trained witnesses.
Yeah. Well, I'd met Colonel Holt, and we spent some days with him, and he came to do the Strange But True programme with ITV with Michael Aspel, and Harry Harris had organised this end, everything, and apart from the TV stuff, we'd had a conference of Charles speaking in Manchester, one in Todmorden, which Alan Godfrey organised, and Graham Birdsall did one for Quest in Leeds, and I ferried him around with Harry and Linda and one or two other people from where he was staying in Manchester to the venues, and we could set up some recording gear, or a PA system for doing his talks, apart from the leads requested their own thing on that one. So I got to know him quite well, and I had no doubt the things he was saying, and having met the man, that it was a genuine event.
Okay then, David, well...
So to hear Jenny Randall's poo-pooing it was a shock.
Right. Well, we're going to go for a short commercial break now, David, and we'll hear more from David Cayton after this break. Don't go away. Welcome back on board the Starship, and we're talking with UFO researcher David Cayton. Now, the world of UFO research can get a bit murky, can't it, David? Because there's quite often infighting with people who come across stories and they want to keep them to themselves. And,
yeah,
and
I found this very disappointing and sad, really, because there's so much backbiting and petty jealousies between ufologists who someone who came across a good case, for example, and for various reasons, sometimes monetary reasons, they seem to think they could earn megabucks by the media paying out a lot of money for reporting in the papers.
I mean, I've had experience of this, David, where people will report something to me on my website, and you know they'll have some photographs of what they perceive to be a brilliant UFO shot or whatever, and it's maybe quite average, and you say, well, I'll put that on my TV program. It's worth airing, and then they kind of back off and say, oh, well, no. They then start thinking of money. So immediately someone wants money for something. I just say, well, sorry, I can't help you.
Yeah, I remember Graham Bursell saying to me once, they will not pay big sums to the national media. No. And this is the illusion that people were under. Yeah. But it caused lots of upsets. Instead of disseminating information for the benefit of ufology and everybody in it, they would keep it to themselves, like, I'm a private collector, I'm not letting you hear my case, and all this carry on. Yeah. And I think this infighting was almost encouraged by certain senior people in the Bufora, I'm sorry to say, whose objective, I think, is to do U-turns like Jenny Randall's and cause dissent, and the media, if they weren't tipped off, pick up on this and capitalise on it. And ufologists in the media were called all sorts of labels and not very derogatory comments like UFO spotters and anoraks and cranks and all this, which had the effect of putting members of the public off to coming to ufologists to report a sighting. And the way they saw the media were treating ufologists, like the media saying, I've heard so many times, look, ufologists can't even agree on a sighting, on a description of a craft or whatever, and all this backbiting. So that would also means that witnesses would the last people they would go to and distrust is the media, because then they would be made a fool publicly and ridiculed. So it impeded information being reported from members of the public who had a close encounter or something, getting out. And I think that was the intention.
Without mentioning any names, we suspect that certain people who do get a lot of media attention, we often wonder, whose agenda they are following. And why would somebody want to spend all of their life proving that something isn't true or a phenomenon isn't real, and that's all they're doing. To me, it doesn't seem that you would motivate yourself just to do that. That perhaps there is some hand at work from an authority, who knows what it is, that's making people take this particular stance.
Yeah, and to do it, for a decade or more continuously, you would put yourself off, wouldn't you? If you would lose interest.
Eventually, if you think there's nothing to it, eventually you think, well, I've done enough research, there's nothing to it. I'm now going to go and
go fishing or something.
Yes, go fishing. Yeah, exactly. But they don't. They stick at it for decades.
Yes.
Pouring cold water on cases and sometimes coming up with preposterous explanations for concrete cases.
Yes.
Okay. And what about? We were talking about Harry Harris earlier on, and Harry has been very much involved with abductees.
Yes.
There's people who claim to have been in their sleep taken on board UFO craft and had operations done on them interfered with by extraterrestrials. It sounds unbelievable, but if you follow the work of people like Professor John Mack and
Bud
Hopkins.
Yeah.
This is a real phenomenon.
Yeah,
This is happening.
Yeah.
And Harry Harris was a British researcher who regressed a lot of people.
Yeah, I actually attended 4 of the hypnotic regression sessions. A couple of witnesses I found myself, which I handed to Harry. And I was always very sceptical about hypnosis, I suppose, born by these stage hypnotists.
Yes.
But I was impressed, and he was employing medical doctors, and they had training in it, and the dentists use it, and all sorts of trauma sort of things. So people ridicule hypnosis, but the medical profession use it all the time.
The thing that impressed me about something that Harry Harris said, I saw a video of him, and he said that what drew him into it and what made him believe that hypnotic regression was valid, he saw somebody regressed and that was taken back to their childhood. And they remembered all of these things in their childhood that they'd actually consciously forgotten.
Yes.
So that they were then brought out of hypnosis and said, well, this is what you said about your childhood. All these things that this person had completely forgotten about and was like, wow, now I remember that you've told me all of this stuff. So it does unlock memories which are in part of the brain which can't be accessed. There's no doubt that hypnotic regression works.
Yes.
There's a conscious side of the brain and an unconscious side of the brain.
Yeah.
And it taps into that other side.
Yeah. Anyway, I was impressed the way this particular doctor, and he was charging a fee, obviously, brought the subject, put them under. We weren't allowed to see him put him under.
Right.
But he described a technique of like you're looking at a film and rolling the film backwards and forwards, and if the subject got too stressed, he said, I'm rewinding the film to bring them back. It was very good.
And of course, Harry Harris was the man who got P.C. Alan Godfrey through 4 hypnosis sessions, I believe. And I believe you've seen those tapes.
I've seen the tapes, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very good.
They're quite convincing, are they? Or?
Yeah, I think so. In places,
Right.
I mean, lots of it, nothing much is happening a lot of the time.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, and I'm sure what happened to Alan was real, and he was taken in Todmorden. And Harry, the BBC did this program, a Horizon program,
about alien abduction.
About abductions,
claims.
yes, claims, and it was fronted by Dr. Susan Blackmore, who was a psychologist, I think, with Bristol University.
It's kind of the public-friendly psychologist.
Yes, all bubbly, and she's a very presentable person, that personality, which she's very good on screen.
Explains things in noddy terms for the noddy public.
And she linked up with a Canadian guy, Dr. Michael Persinger. And anyway, between them all having temporal lobe problems and dream paralysis and sleep paralysis, I should say, and all this false syndromes, whatever. And Harry, being Harry, was incensed, as a lot of people were, saw that program, because it was clearly the BBC debunking abductions.
Yes.
And he contacted some brain surgeons in Harley Street, specialists, and they wrote back to Harry saying quite clearly she was talking a little rubbish.
Right. Okay.
And out of order. And Harry had this information, and he went to this Lapis conference in Lytham St Anne's, again late 90s, I think. And the chairman was Sam Wright at the time, negotiated a slot. He wasn't scheduled to speak, and to spend 10 minutes reading the comments from these brain specialists.
From the brain specialists.
Yes, to shoot down.
What the BBC had shown on
program,
the Horizon program.
Particularly Susan Blackmore. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
And he'd done that and sat down, and they were about to start the next afternoon session. And again, this was a Bufora-linked associated conference. And the next thing, and I was reporting on it for Quest magazine, the proceedings, and they allowed me to run a tape recorder just to help as an aide-memoire for me to write the notes after, so I wouldn't forget what all the speakers have said. And it was the first time that Nick Pope had appeared on a UFO platform, and the national press did a bit of interview on the stage, as I remember.
So this would probably be just after he left his employment at the MOD.
Yes, right. And he was now an ex-MOD man getting into ufology, so he was big news. Anyway, I don't think Nick was in the hall when this disgraceful episode took place, but and I had my tape recorder running, so I have a record of this. And this chap marched up the centre aisle, and there was 350 people in the room. Right. And he shouted out, Harris, you are the shit on the underpants of ufology. And everyone was in total shock.
Harry Harris, you are the shit on the underpants of ufology.
And the vice chairwoman, who was a woman of Lapis, was also shouting to the back, supporting this chap, whose name was Joe Dormer, in making these rude comments about Harry, which was absolutely disgraceful. And I didn't, to discredit Mark Birdsall, said he wouldn't include that episode in my report in the UFO magazine of the Lapis conference. But again, it was a sign to me that there was this trouble between ufologists. And I found out that the reason why he did this was because it was P.C. Allen Godfrey again, the hypnosis tapes we mentioned earlier. Harry had lent to a member of Lapis out of interest, and unbeknown to Harry, they were mounting a Bufora conference in Blackpool, I think, sometime in the near future, and they were advertising as the main event. They were going to run to the public Allen's hypnosis tapes, and they had not got consent from Allen Godfrey in the first place, nor from Harry, whose tapes in copyright they were. And Harry, someone tipped him off, and he found out, contacted Allen Godfrey, who of course blew his top, and insisted it was withdrawn. So their main crowd puller to get bums on seats was that those tapes. And that's why they were upset with Harry, and why that guy made those disgusting remarks. I thought this is bad news for ufology.
Yes. Well, we'll talk more after the next section, because this time each week I'm going to introduce the artist of the week, where we get a singer or a band, and this week we're featuring singer-songwriter Ronnie Lambert, who sadly died last year, and his wife Hazel has agreed for us to play this track, which is a superb track, and it's all about the history of Northumbria.
From the Tweed down to the Tees, from the Cheviot Hills to the Great North Sea, lies a realm of days gone by, steeped in bloody war and filled with battle cry. Once came the mighty hand of Rome, reached these distant shores and made this land her own. And we took 400 years to civilize. As soon as she was gone, the work of her hand we despised. I can hear the Vandals cry, this is my land, Northumbria, this is my land, Northumbria. Soon the Saxon would arrive to rape and burn and pillage, nothing would survive. The Viking found his way here too. Marauders came from Mercia, seeking pastures new. Imagine young King Oswald as he knelt in prayer. Cadwallader's pagan hordes were on their way. He fought them down from Heavenfield to Hexhamshire. Those Welsh invaders died that very day. I can hear young Oswald say, this is my land, this is my land, Northumbria, this is my land, this is my land, Northumbria, this is my land, this is my land, this is my land, Northumbria, this is my land, this is my land, Northumbria, this is my land. Kings have come and gone for years, and the kingdom of Northumbria has drowned in many tears, yet her pride and spirit still prevail. In a history, in a culture, and a wealth of ancient tales, her peace at last is there for all to see, and her only battle now is to attract new industry as a tourist throng invades the northeast coast. They find themselves confronted with a warm and friendly host. I can hear the northeast boast, this is my land, this is my land, Northumbria, this is my land, this is my land, this is my land, Northumbria, this is my land, this is my land, this is my land, Northumbria, this is my land, this is my land, Northumbria.
Welcome back on board the Starship. We appear to have another guest on the show who seems to have got caught up in the teleporter machine. I'll need to have a word with the engineers about that. This is actually Ulysses the rabbit, who's the pet on the Richplanet Starship. Okay, round about this time in the show, I'm going to be getting public opinions, and this is where I go out and about on the streets of England, trying to find alternative or original opinions. And now it's time for the interesting scientific fact of the week. And it is that if our sun were just 1 inch in diameter, the nearest star would be 445 miles away. Okay, now I think I'll just put Ulysses back in his cosmic hutch. Come on. Unclip the mic. Sorry about that.
More rabbiting now, is it?
Certainly. Okay, we were talking, we mentioned Nick Pope in the previous section, and he's probably a key figure in British ufology, so I think we should talk about him a little bit. Yeah. What's your opinion? Come on, be honest about Nick Pope. Is he still working for the government?
Yes, perhaps not so directly as he was, but I'm sure he's been retained in some way. He has admitted actually to Colin Andrews in America recently at a conference that his masters weren't far away, because Colin was pressing him on this very point. And I'd always had suspicions way back, and some of my friends and colleagues similarly, that he was probably more of a free agent for the MOD to be seen as a retirement and no longer on the payroll, perhaps, to be more relaxed with the ufologists and picking up what was going on, perhaps feeding back good information.
So you heard that on the Richplanet Starship. Nick Pope's masters are not very far away.
No, that's right.
Okay. Right.
From his own lips, that was to Colin Andrews last year.
Okay.
And
one thing I do know is that when he publishes books, that they have to go to the MOD first before he can publish them, I believe. Yeah. He has to, because of the Official Secrets Act that he originally signed. That doesn't necessarily mean he's still working for them, but means that they have to okay anything he wants to publish, I guess. Okay, and you had a particular disagreement with Nick Pope about the Milton Torres case. I'll just fill the audience on the Milton Torres. Yeah, sure. Fill the audience in on the Milton Torres case. This was 1957. A U.S. Air Force pilot was ordered to shoot down a huge UFO flying around above Ipswich.
Yes. By the time they got there, it was in the North Sea. It moved across the coast, and it was the wingman. There was two of them, not just Milton, but the other guy as well, who were ordered to chase this object and fire the weapons.
And we've actually covered that in one of our programs, the Cayton files, where you went through the whole chain of command, right from the top, which was
yes, headquarters of Fighter Command.
Fighter Command, and you went through all of the different levels, and then it would then go to the pilot, who would be authorised to shoot it down. And Nick Pope came out with the fact that...
Well, he said in the national press that, now whether it was a personal belief or he was echoing the MOD party line, perhaps a mixture of both, I don't know, that the order to, or the action to actually fire a weapon at a UFO would be down to the pilot's discretion, basically. And it was left to him to judge the situation and do it, which I think is absolute nonsense, because bear in mind it was Cold War days. The Russian aircraft, the Bear aircraft, were always infiltrating and penetrating our radar and have to be escorted by our fighters back again to Russia. So it was a very twitchy time of period. So if a pilot was to launch very expensive ordnance, and we're talking about 24 Mighty Mouse Aeromite missiles, and his wingman another 24, that's a very expensive ordnance to blast off.
So in your opinion, as ex-RAF, there is no way that a pilot could fire missiles at his own discretion. He would have to be ordered by the Fighter Command, without a doubt.
There might be an exception if he was under attack himself. So in self-defence and preservation, he might give him license to fire a cannon or whatever it was at whoever was attacking him. But this was a programmed chase, which was monitored and controlled by the ground radar and people of senior rank, and he was given a coded order, which Milton was shocked about. He said he checked it and questioned it because he couldn't believe he'd been given this instruction. So, and when a foreign national and the Americans are on our airspace, there's no way, in that particular case, as an American, he would have authorization to fire his missiles. Just as Charles Holt has said, and people do Rendlesham, when they went out of the base at Bentwaters into the forest, they had to remove their sidearms and the rifles and leave them with a guy in the truck inside the base because they've now stepped out into the forest on British soil. So it's just absolute nonsense.
And perhaps the reason why Nick Pope said that in the press was to protect the commanders who made the decision.
Yes, he was trying to move the onus off British
hierarchy, military
the MOD,
hierarchy,
Fighter Command, are giving that order. So it was the pilot's decision. I think that's terrible.
Okay. Okay. Now we've mentioned quite a few names so far. I'm just going to list a few other names.
Yes, I've painted rather a bad picture so far, haven't I, about ufologists and ufologists.
I don't know about that, David.
So in general, so I think to redress the balance, there's a lot of good guys out there doing good stuff.
There certainly are. I've got a list here. We just sort of knocked this together during the break. Obviously, Timothy Good, Gary Heseltine, Margaret Fry, Omar Fowler, Roy Dutton, your friend Robert Hulse, Tony Topping, Andrew Johnson, Andy Russell, Scott Felton, Phil Hoyle, all
doing good UFO
doing
stuff,
good UFO
and adoption things. And,
I apologise if I've missed anyone.
Yes, I mean there are plenty, but what's lacking is few good UFO groups that people, member of the public who lives in like Manchester, where are they? I want to join a UFO group. And Quest used to have a directory with all these people listed in, which was thrown into one of the magazine issues, and that of course is gone. And there's few of them about these days. Yeah,
it's sort of, there are still some magazines out, there's Nexus, there's Fortean Times, there's Flying Saucer Review. Have we missed any, David?
Well, Omar Fowler has his own in-house little magazine.
Yes.
And one or two people do that, self-produced things.
But of course now a lot of it's moved over to internet discussion forums and internet websites and that kind of thing. So I guess that's drawn a lot of the interest onto the internet.
Yeah, it's supplemented the loss of hard copy magazines, and you get instant. The bonus is you get instant information, and can promulgate information very fast, which we couldn't do in the past. So,
and of course, on mainstream television, we get very, very little coverage of the subject, all aspects of it, UFO sightings, the abduction phenomenon, recovered UFO cases and this kind of thing, like the Aztec craft or the Roswell incident. They're never given any
depth. There's nothing in depth.
I mean, the latest thing that was on was the Danny Dyer documentary.
Yeah, I Believe in UFOs.
I Believe in UFOs,
Yeah.
and we all sat and watched that.
Yeah.
And any opinion on that, David?
Well, it had good points, but bad points. And I thought it worked in the sense of him starting from cold to explore, the whole business. But I think overall it didn't present ufology in a very good light.
The thing that disappointed me was from word go, he chose to go and see Patrick Moore. Now, I've actually met Patrick Moore. I met him in the early 90s when he spoke at Newcastle University. And Patrick Moore has never believed in the existence of extraterrestrial life on Earth, that extraterrestrial life has visited Earth. So he does not believe, UFOs are extraterrestrial in origin. Categorically, he never has.
No, I've heard him make derogatory comments on television programs in the past about the little green men and and ufologists being
why
sort of a shilling and all that.
Yes. So why would you go to him to find out about the subject first?
Yeah.
I mean, why not go to Stanton Friedman? Because he went to the States, didn't he?
Yes, he did,
And he could have spoken to Stanton Friedman, Stephen Greer, perhaps.
Yes,
Dr. Edgar Mitchell.
Yeah, absolutely.
They would have been good people to have on his show.
Yeah.
And I would say, I don't know. He went and visited a bunch of hippies in the States, didn't he? They were all sort of. I don't know.
Yeah, they have. It's a UFO group of a sort, isn't it? And they have seen things, and things happen. Yeah. But it didn't give a good tone, I don't think, to the whole subject. In this country, he could have gone and spoken to Timothy Good, couldn't he?
Yeah.
Never mind the names you mentioned in the States. So.
I think originally they did approach Orma Fowler, and then for some reason they didn't interview him.
All right, I didn't know.
So it's a little bit disappointing the way it is portrayed on the mainstream.
But again, a lot of these television people, they think astronomers have all the answers because they're looking at the sky. But I mean, they're not looking in wide angle. They're using high-powered telescopes with very narrow fields of view. It's a very small portion of the sky, and they're not. So for a UFO to pass in front of a telescope for them to see it, it would be pretty unusual and very unlikely, I think.
I think with astronomers, from what I've gathered, majority of them, think there's nothing to the UFO phenomenon.
No. Well, there's a bit of arrogance there, isn't there? They want to think that they're going to find
they want to be the ones to announce to the world that they've found intelligent life.
Yes.
They don't want someone tapping them on the shoulder while they're looking through their telescope saying, actually, there's an alien base and they're all living underground. Yeah. You're looking in the wrong place, mate. Yeah. They want to be with their, Lovell telescope. Oh, we found the signal. Yeah. Well, that's you're stealing their thunder by...
That's a prime case, isn't it? It was a UFO hovering over the Jodrell Bank telescope for over an hour, and it's not reported, they don't see it. Okay, it was a radio telescope, it wasn't an optical scope, but it's ironic that they are looking for signals way out in space under the SETI contract, and there's the evidence sitting 300 feet above their heads, It's laughable, really. So.
And I think NASA have a big part to play in it all with regards astronomers, because all of the images from the Hubble telescope, for example, and many other telescopes that are controlled by NASA,
NASA's funded largely by the military.
Yes, and
budgets.
NASA are notorious for manipulating the truth and not really letting people in on what's going on up there. What's going on here in space.
Yeah. Going back to the internet, one of the bonuses of the internet, of course, is it's harder for the authorities to block information and rubbish it and debunk things. So,
but I mean, I've heard that that they are in subtle ways that they've got departments within U.S. Air Force intelligence that monitor certain above top secret in forums such as that, they go on under false aliases and post messages to try and diffuse and discredit certain theories.
Yes, that's another way of countering and discrediting and debunking.
And Wikipedia, Colin Andrews, I was in email contact with him, and he's very suspicious of interference with Wikipedia, because he tries to correct the crop circle page on a regular basis, and then every time he does it, it's removed straight away.
So it makes you wonder who's doing the tweaking and altering the information.
Exactly. So what I do, I use Wikipedia a lot for information and ufological information, but I wouldn't only use that. I don't fully trust it. I think once something becomes as huge as Wikipedia, then that's when authorities may want to then start to control it. So, they are trying to control elements of the internet, I would suggest. Okay.
Anyway, I think what you're doing with this, your show, is a very good outlet, and well done. Keep it up, Richard.
Right. Well, we haven't been interfered with yet, to my knowledge. Okay. No. But thanks very much for coming in, David.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Okay. I'm just going to finish with a few announcements before we beam David back down on planet Earth. At Lytham St Anne's, there's the Probe UK International UFO and Paranormal Conference. That's on the 27th and 28th of March and costs £16 per day. And among the speakers are Andrew Johnson, Tony Topping, and me. Also, AV4, actually it overlaps, it's on the same date, on the 26th, 27th and 28th of March. That's the Alternative View Conference, organised by Ian Crane. And that's at the Thistle Hotel, Heathrow, London. And speaking at the conference will be David Bellamy, Johnny Ball, Brian Gerrish, and many others. So thank you very much for watching, and keep your eyes on the skies and your feet on the ground, and tune in next week.